Yeah, hello, folks. Um, this is a talk in the Bioregional Regeneration Summit meeting, the transformation of natural systems called natural growth, uh, the natural growth path. And I'll start sharing some slides and talk more about introducing it, how nature so elegantly changes from rapid growth to perfecting new lives like it did with our bodies. Um, going from 1 to 1 trillion cells in the womb, and then uh, uh, at birth, suddenly discovering to any new life's shock that it actually has to do things in life, that you come out into a complex world. So that's essentially what's happening to our global society. We focused on growth forever and found out that growth is a plan to change plans, because it upsets its own process, if nothing else. Most growth systems, like for our bodies or other organisms, have a internal plan that expects a change in plans and is prepared for it. We haven't been, so that's really the problem. Uh, yeah, my site is at the bottom of this slide, synapse9.com signals, and you can find my writing and short essays and links to various things, to my YouTube channel and so on that first page of that. And my general email for conversation is sy at synapse9.com, the same site, sy. And so the key to this is that it's not just nature that creates elegantly beautiful designs after a growth process. People do it all the time. And that's what we really can learn from first before we then dive into understanding how nature does it. So this is about possibilities for transformation, learning how natural systems and we often do it so successfully, and then hoping that learning will help us apply it elsewhere. We do it at home, and it's our focus at work to start something up and then get it to work. And so how do we see the process more clearly? Well, we go through the timeline. When we start something up, we have an idea that's energizing and but uncertain, and we play around with it and see what else can connect, and then we see it's something we want to build upon. That's sort of a germination point. And then as we build upon it, that's what growth is. Growth is a building process on a starting pattern. We get it up to a point where we make a decision whether it's viable or not as an idea and new design to continue to perfect, or something to drop. And we do that often with ideas at home and work. Think of things to do, a new travel plan or a holiday plan or a dinner plan, and then decide, oh no, something's wrong. We can't put this together. But when we do decide, then we switch gears. We go from expanding on the original idea to coordinating it with the world around us. So that's sort of a reversal of attention from what you started from, working with what you started from, to what you're going to make work in the world. And it certainly helps to see that if you're immersed in the context. So in a family situation, everybody has a one-to-one relationship with everybody else, and you can see the context very clearly. They're the live relationships that you're constantly in touch with. At work, you can see the live relationships you're actively in touch with in the office, but you can't see the live relationships your business's work is in touch with in the world because they're so far, far away. And so this symbolizes that. Two networks, one shown with its internal hives, each node here symbolizing a family or a village or a town, an ecology, something with an active one-to-one hive of relationships. And yeah, let me. I was about to sneeze. I was going to turn off my audio and can't. Anyway, so this is the relationship we find ourselves in. That in many places we have wonderful contact with the relationships we're involved in and affecting and affected by, and in other places they're very distant, and that is then amplified by where we have distant relationships. Our customary habit has been to apply general rules, like how much profit you're going to make from that, and ignoring what's going to happen in those contexts of living systems. So when you're working with distant relationships, it tends to be working sort of remote control over other things. And of course, economics is defined as a science of ignoring that and just following the rules for money. And so we have these siloed communities, the professional community of economists, business, finance, government, and that all are enamored with the quite powerful remote control rules that ignore what they're controlling, so long as they maximize profit. So we have this is something that's been with humanity for thousands of years. You can trace its history in terms of cultures that grew and grew and grew until they collapsed. For example, there were numerous ones in the Fertile Crescent. There was the first major Greek culture, the Minoan culture, that was followed by a 300-year dark age, and then of course the Roman culture that was followed by a 300-year dark age, and we're certainly pushing nature to that point ourselves. And so that's the hazard that so far I have been really finding it difficult to get anybody concerned with. It's as if there's nothing that we can do about it. There are definitely things we can do about it. We can learn how growth systems turn to the opposite intention and purpose, from multiplying a system to coordinating and harmonizing and maturing a system, like nature does with creating plants and trees and as well as storms and societies and cultures and ecologies and of course all our social and political movements, and those are all developing by natural growth means, and most of them stabilize. Now, some are not, like the U.S. Problem with radical conspiracy theory spread that has half the country in deep anxiety about the something like the end of life if they don't lie enough about stealing elections. So it's all about the same thing. You nurture something to grow, and then how do you sense when is the right time to care for it? And we have a lot of experience with children. We understand, their growth periods and how the care moves from one thing to another during the process. And we also notice upon birth that they need care and at the limit of their exponential growth. So we're at the limit of our exponential growth, and we need our system needs care, and the people in it are people, and they need care. So where all this came from, and by the way, please, if you have questions, bring them up at any time. We have enough time to be leisurely, and I talk a lot, so I don't mind being interrupted. But so to where this came from, my natural systems science was from studying what physics avoided. I was I went to school in physics, and my dad was a physicist. I learned a whole lot from him. He taught me to be observant about patterns. And when I went to study physics, I noticed that there were patterns that physics didn't study, like the little bursts of energy in organization at the beginning and end of every event. There's always this little takeoff and landing part of any change of state. Like when you make a meal, you take off with an idea, and you get out the ingredients, and then you start putting them together in bigger steps, and then you make some adjustments. So there's that growth from the original idea, and then you start making adjustments for the end purpose, and then at the very end you add the finishing touches, the little bursts of things that crown it and make it all real, that tie it together and make it whole. So the beginning event and the ending event of a growth process are both very important. So my background is I was in a science family, multi-generation, and I grew up in a small town where everything worked, and then found a big world where increasingly everything wasn't, and got together with close friends who were on the case. This is a group apartment that myself and a friend set up in Brooklyn after we graduated from college, and us and our friends sort of stumbled on our first career opportunities, and we decided to get together and hang out and have fun instead. And we also found work in New York. But we talked about everything, and that helped me see that my ideas about what was missing in physics were valid, and I should find some place where I could study them. And I found it in architecture, where the connecting parts of beginnings and endings are always important. And physics only wants the fixed rules. It thinks it can make fixed rules about changing things, but it stumbles all the time. So anyway, so my first big discovery was growth was an organization process. It was not numbers, it was not equations, it was not cause and effect. But what we do with growth is find and connect. So that was a big aha, that the natural world works by a different system than science describes. And science is a digital model, and nature's not. Nature's a organizational model of complex connecting things. And you see that in how groups of friends connect. They harmonize in a tight way. They're not just bumping in uh, or behaving randomly. Anyway, so one of the things that that is different also about the physics and natural systems view is that natural systems are guided by signals from their environments, from their contexts. That when you start giving a speech in an audience, if you hear a rustle of some kind that signals that you ought to change subjects and go on, well, then if you're attentive, you do. So that's the kind of feedback that of meaningful signals that nature is full of, and that growth is guided by. And then, as far as finding interesting things in the world to study, it's often ironies, like the irony of well, this summit meeting is connected with LinkedIn, a lot of people, and that's where I found out about it. And at LinkedIn, there are two big communities. Well, one is actually bigger, but the other is this community, the community of regenerative thinkers who are trying to provide the services to their environments that would allow them to take their own direction rather than be forced by the world economic system to produce more and more for less and less, as it naturally does. So what I was trying to say was that there are these two groups of people at LinkedIn. There's the business side and the environmental sustainability regenerative side, and they're so close, and they're all such educated people, highly educated people on both sides, but doing very different kinds of work, and it would be a golden opportunity for them to talk. But so far, I haven't really found much support for that. One person thought the idea was great, but the people that I'm most closely working with haven't. They don't think talking to the enemy is a good idea. I think the enemy are nice people who don't know what have gotten into, in the sense that it's threatening the world with an economic collapse that could last a long time. So the financial, business, government communities that are pushing growth, which includes the UN, unfortunately, even though it says it's doing everything else, it's not. And climate change, which is also the climate change response is for accelerating growth, to pay for changing the technology, but the CO2 is still accelerating, like the economy, and it's so that trying to preserve the old system when you really need to change plans. That's where we are. So ironies abound, and there are good places to look for things. So in context, when we're in context, we read the signs for steering what we're doing. And out of context, we don't. We instead make concepts and rules to suit ourselves, to guide our decisions rather than read the environment. And so it seems as if our rudder keeps getting stuck on the rules we liked of the past. And in the past, societies very much like the rule of growth and loved it, but now it's destroying the planet. And, so it's not something to love, and people don't know that they made a choice or how it's maintained. So, so still all steering starts much the same way. Steering a car or our bodies or lives takes free energy and opportunity and information, reading the signs from your community or environment. Normally, we read the context and stay on track pretty easily with our work. If you're in the neighborhood or at home in a meeting like this or others, we listen for and read the signs. They're usually sometimes they're very hidden, of course, and then you have to respond in a agile way when you find out about them, unless you're blind to the whole thing. And some people become so devoted to their conceptual worlds, like some of the professionals that peak of the profession people are so fixated on their professional way of looking at things that they become blind to the natural relationships. And so there's a need to have a way to help those people and care for them, because they are steering our ship in large part, and we need to help them survive and steer the ship differently. So in the economy, it takes free energy, opportunity, and reading the signs. And the free energy is in the economy is the profits of the economy, the money that is not committed to anything else. And what the profits are invested in is what steers the economy. And at the moment, the profits are invested in multiplying profits. And in the future, if we survive, they will have been turned to caring for the system that we created, at least the parts of it that we like. At the moment, we have what amounts to a never steer rule in society. Never question the basic premise of using our power to multiply our power, even though it's very obvious from history that fails dramatically in almost every case where someone gets stuck on it. That's, of course, the Faustian bargain. So how does it work in nature? Well, you can see various things. There's some symbolic diagrams of homes. These are homes from the pre-Greek world where the Greek home life culture developed, a 2,000-year Bronze Age culture that was stable in the Aegean and near areas, and also on Crete to some degree. And that was the source of Greek culture and architecture and so forth, to have these big wide rooms with a central hearth. That's the central image is more like that. And although there's a little fiction in this diagram, the big windows, the big picture windows on either side of the central hearth are not there in primitive houses at all. They don't have those. But anyway, all of these other things also grow by growth. A home begins with an idea, and then a plan and some help, and starting something and finding out what'll work, and then perfecting it in the same way that a city or a snowflake or people or a tree or even a storm develop. And it all goes, at least in terms of energy terms, according to something like this curve, where the A curve is the rapidly accelerating acceleration, the building process that takes off and multiplies, but it's a building process of organization. In most cases that we study, it could also represent the building process of a fire, where a fire spreads exponentially for a while, and then reaches a climax of some sort and holds steady for a period of time. And then, of course, every system that develops has a downside too. I'm just more interested in helping people understand the upside, because that's what our problem is with, is the upside. And we love the upside too. So we have a lot of understanding of the upside of growth in how our lives are lived that we could apply to the upside of growth in how our world is evolving. And that's what I hope happens from spreading this knowledge. And let's see. So how do we do it? What signs do we read to change plans? And this is a point where I really would like to ask those of you who've been listening. I hope you've gotten some of the sense of what this is about, and come up with some answers of what kind of signs do you read when that tell you to change plans? Do you have any examples that you think of right off, either in personal or business or political life, of where you've been doing one thing for a while and you see you should do something else? Anybody have any suggestions? Johnny, Joe, Mary Lou, Martha, Lynn Marie?
Not sure if this applies, but you will probably figure out for me how it does.
Okay.
Big plans that I've made lately, actually, I didn't really learn from the first mistake, was in thinking after more than 20 years of learning about sustainability. I mean, it started out as that back in the 90s. It was called sustainability. That deciding that it was a good idea at this point in my life to go back to school and get some validation through a master's. So I tried it. I tried it doing a master's of art in design research. And I realized I don't want to be an academic researcher. I love to research. I love to learn, and that part keeps going, but I don't want to have to put it into a research question and all that. So then I thought, well, maybe I should try this other new, brand new Master's of Science in Circular Innovation and Sustainability. And 2 weeks into it, I realized, no, it's the same mistake, because it's academia. And even though it's supposed to be a cross disciplinary with different, it's in the University of Applied Sciences. It has the engineering people, the business people, all the different institutes, but that are teaching us, but they're each teaching us separately. So it's completely missing this idea of it's pretty much that first on the left, what you had from afar, the distance with all the separate nodes without. And so I don't know. I mean, the change of plans I've made is just kind of going back to what I've been doing for so long, and realizing that communicating, meeting with people like you, as I, just learning from people who are out there, processing, synthesizing, applying my own intuition, my own knowledge. It's bringing me closer and closer to seeing things. So I don't know.
Right. So there's an interesting pattern of reading signs there. You first had the urge to do something else. You'd come to a point where you were unsatisfied with what you were doing, and what John Maynard Keynes called animal spirits arose and took you to try something else, and your information turned out not to be consistent with your intuition.
And I think in a way, Jessie, what I was doing was I was between these two worlds, because I think I have always lived in a very, very much aware of the people around me, the things around me, and how the things I do affect. So all those little nerve endings or things that you had come in the second image. But it was a sense that I need to somehow quantify and validate what I already know that I know.
Right.
So it's stepping into the world of, well, then maybe I could market, I could monetize my knowledge. And so it's
Uh-huh.
going between the two worlds. I think,
Uh-huh.
that's what it came
Right. Well,
to.
searching for a new world. I had a similar challenge in going from physics and math, were my initial concentrations, to architecture. I'd never thought of architecture, and it turned out to be absolutely perfect for what my intuition was. That I was studying how things emerged by bursts of intuition, and then had to be refined with long periods of correction and connection, and yeah. But those intuitions, those little hello there, you've got to change things. I can see several in your story, and those are what I think the people managing the world economy need to have. They need to have the little intuitions that, oh, maybe this is having some negative effect. Maybe all these things we called externalities are internalities. Boy, wouldn't that be something? And then, well, maybe we better take care of our primary resource. Wouldn't that be something? That would be a shock.
I have lots of thoughts on that, but I see that Johnny turned on his camera, so I will,
Yes.
in case you want to say something, I'll
Yes,
come back.
right. Well, we've been talking. Anyway, Johnny, what's up?
So my example is after like 20 years, something similar but slightly different from what Martha just mentioned. After around 20 years of management consulting, I earlier this year I decided, yeah, this is not probably giving me the satisfaction of what I want, and the impact that I can make with the knowledge that I have. Right? So the personal satisfaction and the impact, those were the triggers that kind of founded my change plans. And without clear future plans, I moved on into and stumbled upon biomimicry as a practice. And that changed my entire perspective. And I'm so glad I did it. So that was a trigger for my change. And I have an engineering, I'm an engineer by training and a business education. And I realized so much was of my knowledge and skills were not being kind of steered towards the right problems. Right. So that's my I mean, a little bit around how I read change of plans, but then there's still many signals that are still there out there, right? So I've not reached the destination, but at least I know the direction to take for myself.
Uh-huh. So what do you, Lynn Marie or Mary Lou, do you have comments on the kind of signals that you notice either at home or in your life or wherever? No? Let's see that, or yeah, or Zhao. Guess not. Well, I guess the question then is, what are we seeing other people miss? What signals do we see other people missing that we might miss, but we might hesitate in mentioning, perhaps? Like Martha?
So I was thinking about when you're talking about context, and I came in a couple minutes late because I had trouble finding my way to the island, paddling out to the island room. But
Right.
so what I'm thinking, and this might not be what you meant by context, but I'm thinking about how context can be different for, so that if you're in a conventional business environment and you have your responsibilities and it's very much based on consistent economic growth and profits and all of that, then in your context, that person is reading all of the signs of that context,
Right.
as opposed to a broader context. And that's what I very much experienced working as a designer in the fashion industry in New York, and thinking,
Oh,
I can change from within. But
uh-huh.
there wasn't much luck with that, because the context I was seeing when, for example, we would change the allocation for a huge program of production from one country to another,
Uh-huh.
that meant to me, okay, what is everything about that country? Like, who are the people and what are their traditions? And do they have a tradition in, for example, making merino knitwear in some island nation,
Right.
and just I wanted to learn about the people, and so for me the context was much broader than probably most of the people I was working with, where they were
Right.
thinking about what are the labor costs and et cetera, all those numbers. So I was thinking about how context, sort of like perception is reality, like context
Right.
is subjective, and I don't know if that, and then it makes it very easy to have externalize all these costs, because they're not even in their frame of reference.
Exactly. Well, that's the kind of structure. I don't see it as a voluntary thing. I see it as a structure of knowledge that develops in a community, and our cultures actually are the origin of our belief systems and our understand. They give us our understanding of reality and a guide to our ways of life, and they're very powerful. They're invisible generally. We just automatically respond to the way we think, but how we think develops from absorbing a culture, and we do that in the first years of life usually, and of course we can experience other cultures, but we usually remain rooted in our original one. But the business cultures, becomes very fixated on their own way of thinking. I'm a systems scientist, and in the systems science community, I'm a bit of an outcast. And oh, hello, Oliver and Arlene. Welcome. We're talking about the kind of signs that we read in making decisions, in making and making change as we develop a project, or as we develop something we're writing, or something we're cooking, or a new relationship, or anything else. All these kinds of creative tasks start with some inspiration, either from nature, finding some new combination of things, and some new set of relationships growing, or ourselves being inspired in our minds with something and getting excited and putting our energy into it. But then you have to make the decisions along the way of, well, once you get something started, then when do you decide whether it's viable or not, and then put your time into refining it until it will work in the world. Getting things started and getting things to work in the world are two different stages of life. For people, we do that. We get things started in the womb, and we get things to work in the world as we grow up, and then become free. But oh, I see. Oh no, I may have messed up the recording with my windows. Oh well, nothing's perfect. Anyway, so does that, Arlene and Oliver, does that give you an idea of what we're talking about?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, so it's learning from your own experience of having a slight sense of something being interesting, and then a minute later going back to it because it might be really interesting. That kind of sign from our environment as we go through the day that um, steers our choices and lets us proceed on our course. So this is a diagram of the, in more detail, of the growth process that is sort of universal. It might take many different shapes and have many different ups and downs, but it's in the end going to get from one point to another point and hold. So it's a change, what you'd call a change of state, something becoming organized. And organization starts from a germination of some kind. For human lives, it's the germination of a cell, and for plants similarly, and for conversations, it's some idea that germinates, and then the process grows exponentially, like our economy is designed to grow forever, but then comes to a decision point where there's a big change in plans, that growth is inherently a plan to change plans, because growth itself is a multiplying of rates of change and reorganization, internal and external, and would cause its own collapse if it continued. So there's a change of plans to what? Well, using the resources that growth developed to then coordinate the system with the future that it's going to need to prepare for. So it's formation, preparation, and then the future is engagement, the new life of the system or the person or the community. Once it's found a comfortable spot in the world, then has a life. I call it living it up, to make it sound more interesting. But life is rather interesting after all. There's all sorts of things that are going on, and most of us, have an experience that is very satisfying in the end. Lots goes on that's painful too, of course. But we have an amazing ability to recover from pain. Now, if our society collapses, though, it will erase our pain more than let us recover from it. The most people today are thinking that well, either we'll just have some new technology, we'll keep growing, or that we're already starting a collapse, and we'll recover from it in 50 years, like we recovered from the Great Depression before, only this time it'll be a little more severe. And then, as I mentioned before, there are those cultures that became addicted to growth and were followed by 200 or 300 year periods of a dark age, where the entire culture of the growth system dissolved and disappeared and was erased and lost all its connections, as when the center does not hold, is the metaphor some people use. That happened to the predecessors of this culture. And that was a bell. I will not attend. Anyway, so that's the question: is can we learn about this well enough to steer the system and that we're in? And generally, I think nature is putting so much pressure on us, emotionally, culturally, intellectually, physically, that something's going to pop, and it could pop the right way. and especially if there's some knowledge of what the right way is. And that would be for the growth system to turn its resources towards caring for the system it grew. I'm not getting much response to that. I'm hoping that
I
as the
didn't-
pressure grows, I'll get
Oh, you
more.
mean you're not getting response with others that you have the conversation with?
Yes.
Okay. You're not looking for a
And-
response from us.
Oh, no, not especially.
Okay.
I'm looking for any questions or comments you may have. This is it.
I do
Yes.
have a question. Because if I think of a forest, for example, and that's sort of that nobody planted. There was no human that physically planted it,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes if it's not really maintained, or if it's minimally maintained, certain plants may emerge. There may be seeds that are dropped, or there may be, because of climatic change or soil conditions, there may be some that thrive, or some invasive that take over. But it's not, I see it as a healthy system like that is always adjusting to new things that are coming in, and maybe some things that are dying. So if I think of a community in that respect, and starting with, really trying to have a very vibrant local community that has everything for, local economy, local resources. It seems to me that I'm curious to know how you would plot that out when thinking of, there isn't really any start, and there may be within that certain the formation, the taking off, the A, B, and C. But then there are other things that would come in that might be at a
Right.
different stage. And so how
Well-
would you explain, how would you describe that?
That would be the living it up.
Okay.
In a climax forest, there's always going to be evolution of birds and animals and plants and cycles, sometimes of fire and erosion and things changing. But nature adapts beautifully, and that's of course one of the things we most admire is how respectful different species are of each other, and that's because they optimize their self-interest. They don't optimize their growth and conquest of the world.
Yeah, they have a common goal of life. And if I think
Well,
of a community where you have people, you have migrants who come in, you have people who are politically diametrically opposed, yet they all really, if they look at themselves as a community, they rely on the same public resource, the water system, all of the municipality. So how can we learn from nature in order to see that it's not about my views versus your views, but it's about the health of the whole system? And if people come in from someplace else, they become part of the system, and they're not an invasive species that needs to be eradicated. They have to somehow be integrated into the system so the system can continue to thrive. So I'm eager to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, the crisis that we're facing ourselves, the multiplying crises all over the planet, of all kinds, that are growing with our obstinance to keep on growing, are powerful force to take power over everything, and manipulate it, and demand that people reorganize their lives faster and faster to serve the profits of the profitable, is of, you can say it's unethical, and you can say it's dangerous and disastrous and a big disservice, but it's physically destructive too. And so those physical destructions are threats to somebody. And so people have to respond to the threats. Like the most of the migrant crisis, to me, I have a picture here of it. This is the data on the migrant crisis, refugee crisis, that it's growing. You can see it's varying but getting bigger and bigger. And that is importantly because the economy has drained all the resources and markets from the world around it, the central economy, and these people are starving. Their homes have become swamped by criminal activity, and that everything breaks down when they can't produce a healthy life. So then they say, well, let's go over to the one of the rich places where they're sucking up the resources from the planet. Let's, because that's the only way we can find a life for ourselves. And so the problems that we're facing are mostly of our own creation, and including and this, I don't know, you probably have heard of the tragedy of the commons as an idea that when one of the examples, the author of that, Hardin, I believe his name was, gave was that of competing defenses, that if you erect defenses to your neighbor, it seems like to your neighbor that you're going to attack, and so they erect defenses, and then you erect more, and that's where the crisis in Ukraine came from. That even though the West really should have said, look, Russia, we're no threat to you at all. We never said that. Even though it was clearly our intent to simply be defensive. Russia, Putin in particular, of course, saw an opportunity to call it an attack, that we were creating defenses against them, even though they were a threat to us. We felt so it just went back and forth like tennis, and now we have the worst of all possible situations with millions of people deprived of municipal services for a winter. What do you do with that? I mean, it's just horrible. So this is negligence of the signals, negligence of the growth signals, and so people should learn to read nature. And of course, the problem that the main interference with it, our ancient languages are full of signals about nature. It's modern science that isn't. Science treats everything as mathematical, and not informational in that way, but simplified to a point of a rule, whereas nature is about fitting things and connecting and finding places. So that was one of the extra slides. This is the concluding slide, and it's now 12:02, and I probably should. Let me stop sharing, say hello to everybody, and let me find the recording. Where's the? Oh, no. Okay. Oh, here. Stop the recording. Thank you very much.
It looks like it's recording again.